Thanks, Aaron, for hopping on with us today. I think we have a exciting conversation just around like the essential components to weight loss, and I guess also you could say that also non-essential components to weight loss as well. Like it can very easily go both ways, but it's a common area that I think we get asked a lot is can you lose weight just with exercise or just with nutrition or just with kind of making some lifestyle changes? And we're going to do our best to provide some guidance in that area, but also understanding kind of going in that it's situational and every, lifestyle is different. Every, I guess variable is kind of different when you look at it in each individual circumstance. But we'll kind of try and provide some general rules and kind of some general guidance that you can follow. So Aaron, to start us off, why do you feel like so many people struggle with weight loss despite like kind of having the knowledge of what they should be doing?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. It's one of those that like I don't want to sound too cliche by saying like, oh, it depends. But I mean, the reality is, like you said a second ago, I think you hit the nail on the head. Like it's going to be context dependent. It's going to be situational depending on the person. We can all, I think there's a base layer of knowledge that everyone knows and understands when it comes to weight loss. That is like, you know, don't eat like this type of food and, try to do this type of exercise or any type of exercise. And, regardless of the rate of weight loss of that, like that general recipe for losing weight of like eat okay, train okay, and do both of them at a, relatively frequent pace, like everyone has that base layer of understanding. So, like people I think struggle, it can come from a couple ways, because even though if we do know that, I think one, and this may just be more relevant to part of the population that I've worked with, but I think the biggest thing, not to sound harsh, is just like self accountability and discipline. Not to say that like certain people are undisciplined, but I think it's very easy. And one of the things I think we run into a lot, and we may have talked about this before, is we see people with this like initial like burst of motivation. And like motivation's a hell of a drug. Like when you have this goal of, I want to lose X amount of pounds or be able to do this much exercise or run this far, whatever it is. And it's really easy to have the motivation to say, I want to do that. How great would it feel if I could do that? When you are in the comfort of, your office chair or your couch. And even throughout those first couple workouts or those first couple healthy meals, like that motivation stays high. You're like, oh, shoot, like I'm doing it. I'm doing it. But again, it's not going to be a quick fix 99.9% of the time. And something like that motivation really fades. So what we then have to turn into to use as like fuel to kind of keep those habits charged is just our own discipline. And discipline is a much less potent of a drug than motivation. And it's really easy to lose motivation. I think that's part of the cycle, and we have some sort of goals that whether it's weight loss or performance related or whatever it is. But going back to that cornerstone of like being self-disciplined enough to kind of stick with that as well is tough. But outside of that, like maybe some people are really really disciplined and or they have that continuous motivation, and yet they still struggle. And I think that's where kind of the other half or bucket of people lie. That, okay, well, I hear you, but I feel like I do have some good discipline. Like I feel like I'm eating well. I feel like I'm exercising regularly, and still am not seeing, the rate of weight loss or the rate of increase that I would like. And that's where like I feel like we could go down a million different rabbit holes of, okay, well, like, is it like an endocrine issue, or is it a training structure issue? Like you may think you're training really well, or is it like a diet structure issue where you think like your nutrition is great and you think you're disciplined with it? Maybe you are, but once we do kind of a self audit of, okay, well, here's what you're actually eating on a day-to-day basis, it doesn't really align with what those goals are. So like it's hard to say in one definitive answer on like that half of the spectrum. like, it could be this or this, when the reality is, honestly, it could be a multitude of things. So not to completely dance around that question, but I think it is important for people to realize that, you know, having that discipline after that motivation may wear off is important, and just having maybe the patience to be able to rely on their own self audit of what they're doing when it comes to their training side, their nutrition side, and saying, okay, well, this is what I'm doing, I haven't seen the results. Like, the cliche thing there is like the definition of insanity is keep doing the same thing over and over, expecting results. And like, okay, well, the reality is we just need to change something. And that something is going to be different from person to person, but that's where, like good practitioners can come into play to help kind of ask the other, like the next better questions to figure out, like, okay, well, actually, no, your nutrition looks great, but let's take a look at your training. Let's maybe adjust these few things. Or like, okay, well, we're also noticing like some other symptoms or health related issues. Like, maybe this is like more of a factor for a doctor as well that we need to go talk to. So it really just kind of depends on the person too.
Yeah, yeah, and I think you hit on some really good points there, especially thinking like there's so many different buckets of things that you can do well, and it's really easy to think like, yeah, I feel like I eat really well, I feel like I train really well, I feel like I'm pretty consistent. But then when you have that like outside perspective, they look at it like, well, you're doing too much, or you're eating quality foods, like you're eating things that would support maybe anti-inflammatory or support digestive health, but you're eating too much of it, or your meal timing's off, or whatever it can be. But the reality is, you're right, like there's so many variables you can change. It's like just start with one and then add that one in, and then you're going to be in a better place. Then you add two and three and four, and it's like, yeah, you're going to make progress no matter what. It's just like you have to do that over a time horizon that's actually going to allow you to make progress. And I think that's, like you said, there's no magic pill. There's no quick thing that you can do to, lose 10 pounds tomorrow. But if you do enough of the things well, like you're going to lose weight. And there's a hierarchy there. You're eating in calorie deficit, you're training at the right amount, you're getting plenty of sleep and managing your stress well. And you notice like, okay, I'm really hot or cold at times, or, no matter what, I'm going to have diarrhea or, other bigger symptoms. Like, yeah, that may be stuff that can be addressed by, well, I mean, maybe, the diarrhea side, probably with like a dietitian could probably do something with that. But you get to the other stuff, like very easily could be something where your doctor has to intervene. But if you're not checking those basic boxes and you're still wondering why you're not losing weight, it's like, well, just start with those basic boxes. And that's not like just eat less and move more, but it's like, let's make sure training is right. Let's make sure we're doing some right, things that are sustainably in a better position nutritionally, and then do it for long enough. Because
Yeah.
yeah, seeing that time horizon is hard though, because it's like you want to see results tomorrow.
Yeah, I mean, the operative word with all this is just patience. Like, the realistic part of the SMART goal for people, especially when it comes to weight loss, is always just that time frame of like what really is feasible for someone when they're introducing new habits, whether that's, diet or exercise or other lifestyle changes. So patience is key, and especially if it does come down to, like you're saying, like just changing that one element at a time and adding something else in, or changing a couple more variables to really figure out what works best for you. Is it takes time, and it's unfortunate, but I think that we can all also find solace and like feel good about at least having a fervent effort in going through that process, though, versus just the, hands in the air, like, well, I'm not motivated anymore. So like, the old lifestyle, it just seems a lot better and easier right now. So we'll go back to that. So, even if you're not seeing the pounds come off immediately, I think taking ownership and, being, proud of yourself, or at least going through that process and having that effort's important too. Um, but we said kind of a few things of like those different variables that like ultimately add up to what like weight loss goals ultimately entail. And again, like diet, your lifestyle or lifestyle choices, but a big one's obviously exercise, right? So I guess next kind of topic we can talk about, like, what do you think in terms of like types of exercises? are there types of exercises that you think are, or types of training that people should, run to, literally or metaphorically, to if their goal is like, hey, I want to lose weight. Like, does it need to be like, hey, hammer the cardio training, or like, no, get into some like hit style training or strength training only? Like, is there a best type for that, depending on the person?
I think that's a great question, but also I think it's very context dependent. I know we say that a lot. Like it is always going to be context dependent because what's going to help a 14 to 18-year-old or college kid lose weight is going to be very different than someone that's in their like 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s. Because you put a 14-year-old that maybe had a poor diet and they can overcome a poor diet just by like, oh, they're training for a sport now, or they start swimming and they're going to struggle to keep weight on. Like they're just more is going to help them. And when you get into like actual life, and that's where it's easy for me to say as like kind of background in exercise and physiology side and say like, well, anything can truly be like helpful given the right context, but putting it kind of in the context of like our clients or like what we've seen that gets the best results is just recognize like the older you are and the more things you have going on. And if you have kids, you have a busy job and family and all those things, like time is of the essence and stress is always going to be high. I don't think people recognize that their life is always stressful. And so it's like maybe we don't err towards the really stressful forms of exercise or the forms that take a really big toll on them. I just posted yesterday one of our clients who lost 10 pounds in a month. And I got like 3 or 4 kind of hate DMs back like pretty quickly, like, hey, this isn't like possible. You shouldn't be posting this. And I was like, okay, well, like, let's talk about like what he did actually. And he came off of doing intermittent fasting. He was trying to run 3 or 4 days a week. He was lifting really heavy and he was kind of trying to manage all of this while like just dealing with tons of stressors and job and all of this stuff. And we're like, all right, well, like, let's scale back a little bit. Like, let's do some exercise, just help you like feel better and not be as tired and exhausted all day. And then, like, yeah, instead of, boxing and doing all this stuff we're going to do, we're just going to walk, 8 to 10,000 steps in a day. And he's like, this feels really easy. And like, it didn't really have to be that difficult because one, I love non-active thermogenesis. Like walking, I think is the best like form of like cardio, I guess, because you're not going to put a lot of strain on your body, but you're going to be like activating more frequently. There is a like if you walk for 10 to 15,000 steps, like your legs are going to be fatigued and you're going to be like there is a endurance component to that as well. I think that honestly is like the trend of what works the best, but everyone is very different. I just personally think like the less stress you add to a already stressed out lifestyle through exercise, you're probably going to get better benefits for it. And I'm talking purely for the person that wants to like, yeah, I got 30 pounds to lose and I haven't been working out much over the last 10 years, or my job requires me to work 60, 70 hours a week. Like, yeah, like let's walk and just feel better and you're probably going to lose weight. Now, especially because I'm talking to a strength coach right now, like I'm sure you hear kind of what I'm thinking, like the very like low intensity side and think like, well, building muscle is a big component of it. And like actually, increasing your metabolism and all of that side. And so like, that's my perspective, but I'm also really interested to hear what you think are those kind of general rules of thumb to follow.
Yeah, it's I mean, like everything, it's tough, but uh like I love like that example from our client. And I think, that's one example where you have someone on the end of the spectrum that may like they have like with other different stressors and a style of training that essentially they may have also just kind of squeezed all the juice out of when it comes to either that weight loss or the performance or whatever they're trying to get out of that style of training. And just something new thrown into the mix can also be helpful. Like our bodies are, I think one thing, not to like have it go under the radar, is our bodies are really, really, really good at adapting to whatever stimuli that are thrown at us. So if you take, I use the example of swimmers, like if, I like we think, and don't get me wrong, like elite level swimmers have to eat the whole buffet. Like they are burning a lot of calories, and elite level swimmers like are training a lot and burning a lot. But where they may burn 1,500, 2,000 calories in a practice, when they go out and, they're swimming, let's say like 6,000 yards total or something. Like if me, a regular person, went out and tried to swim 6,000 yards, one, my body wouldn't let me. But two, for if whatever miraculous reason it did, like I'm going to burn way more than that because my body is not efficient at that type of training. But as we grow accustomed to training, there's our body gets really good or a lot better at being efficient to whatever modality that we're working with. So I think, not to say, I think structure is really important, but I think some newness within structure is also important if our goal is weight loss. So, for someone that has been doing, a lot of the hit style training or hard circuits or heavy lifting, like doesn't mean they have to like stop doing that by any means, but like if adding just a little bit of lower zone cardio, like getting a few extra steps and getting spending one or two of their 5 lift days working a little bit more on like their aerobic base rather than just that like strength and power work, like the reality is like their body, especially early on, is going to adapt pretty quickly to that and get a lot out of that. It's like if you hand someone this is maybe a bad example or comparison, but like if you hand someone an empty bar and they've never squatted a day in their life, and like the first squat that they do like feels kind of awkward, like it's not heavy, but it's not like not light. Like it feels like they have a heavy chunk of metal on their back. And then, a week later, they do it again. It feels easier. Another week later, okay, you add a 25 pound on each side. And like, they're like, no, that's pretty comfortable. That's pretty easy. Just because they doubled the weight in 2 weeks, did that mean that they got twice as strong, in that time frame? Like, no, their body just got used to it. There's like a connect like that, mind like neural connection to the rest of their body of figuring things out, like so again, like adding different stimuli I think can definitely be helpful. I think I've gotten a little bit off track from the original question, but I'll circle it all back here and say that, like, again, a good rule of thumb I think for people that may struggle with wondering like, okay, well, is what I'm doing the best type of exercise, or should I be doing this style of training? I think the answer is it can be just as simple as like, hey, are you over a more chronic period of time, like weeks to months at a time, like are you at least at a slow pace seeing the types of results you want to see? Like if so, like great, keep at it. If not, again, it's going back to that, like let's institute some sort of a change. It doesn't always have to be with exercise, but if you don't see yourself getting stronger and fitter from whatever you're doing, it's like, okay, it's time to, don't have to think of it as reevaluate, but it's time to just, add some variety into what you're doing, give your body new challenges, new stimuli to adapt to. And ultimately that can bode well for you in things like, again, those performance gains or weight loss too. So, again, I guess to kind of wrap a bow on that point, like having that variety, but also understanding that like if what you're doing is working, if like the juice that you're still trying to squeeze out of whatever training you have, like that juice is flowing, like doesn't have to be a change, but finding something that works for you ultimately, I think, is important. But again, we've talked about like exercise, and like how that's important, but like I don't want to beat around the bush and not mention like nutrition as well. And I think there may be a lot of similarities between how we talk about like exercise and how that affects weight loss, and nutrition and how that affects weight loss. Um, so like I guess regarding nutrition, like we get all these buzzwords thrown at us. Like we hear keto, paleo, low carb, high carb. We just put out an article um, on like carbs and like carb deficits, carb surplus. So like is there like a right strategy for anyone, or is there something that may like most holistically work for the whole general population, or things that we need to be considering there?
That's a good question. I think this is something that we talk about, especially with our dietitian Alex, like all the time. Is like, what are the general rules of thumbs that everyone needs to be following? And I think it has to be really like three things, and it has to be One, obviously, like focusing on whole foods and not a bunch of processed garbage is super important. Like it's not just important for like losing weight, but it's important for, being healthy long term. But two, it has to be something that's going to be like enjoyable for you. So something that you can, sustain over a long period of time. And then three, it just has to be calorically like somewhat close to what you want to achieve for a, again, chronic period of time. Like anything can be okay for a short time horizon. Like if you're going to eat, you're going on a boys trip and you're going to eat, McDonald's for 3 days, you'll survive, but you'll probably feel pretty rough towards the end of it. But you're not going to be able to maintain that for like 3 or 4 years. And the same thing goes for when you're talking about, keto and high carb and low carb and all these things that kind of just like put you in a box and don't allow you to actually eat things that you enjoy, is they'll probably get your results over, a short time horizon of up to maybe like 3 or 4 months. But, at some point you're going to be like, you know what, I really just want to like be able to have some carbs, or be able to like eat things and be a little more free. And so I think that's where it's like more so just having a healthy, balanced diet's the most important thing. And having, some moderation with that too. Like, I mean, we're big ice cream people, we're big pizza people, we're love burgers and all the good food. And if you were to tell me like, yeah, I can't ever eat those things again, like I'm probably going to be pretty upset and unhappy. Um, I think we've both been through phases where it's like we've had chicken and rice or beef, and like that's been the main thing that we kind of depend on. I think you probably still do that sometimes, but
Yeah, yeah. Oh yeah. The FODMAP diet. It's not a great time, but that's not for weight loss issues. That's more for the upset tummy issues, but is what it is.
yeah, yeah. Well, and we've had a ton of clients that go through a flush protocol as well, which I mean, I'll try and remember everything off the top of my head, but it's no soy, no wheat, no dairy, no caffeine, no added sugar, no or limited red meat, no sugar alcohols, no alcohol, like that whole spectrum. It's like if you were to say like what's perfect, sure, it's probably like let's cut out most of those things because they're inflammatory. But like one, that's not realistic to cut that stuff out forever. You can like get results from it quickly, but I think having just those general rules of the things that cause irritation to you, or maybe like aren't you're more sensitive to, and like you cut those things out, you can see results pretty quickly. Like we have a client, she went through like that whole flush protocol, and she did awesome. I think she lost like 10 to 15 pounds. So most biggest difference she noticed, like inflammation in her face went down, and then she came, like we kind of eased her back into eating normally, and pretty quickly like she just like swelled up like a balloon, and it was like she just didn't feel good. And so kind of had to go back through that thought, like through that process, and figure out like what's the thing that she was more sensitive to. And she just happened to be really sensitive to corn. And it was like she ate corn and just like, inflammation just shot up. And it was like, okay, well, we're going to add in all these other things. We're just going to eliminate the thing that caused the issue. And so I think having a clinician or someone like be able to help you kind of work through that stuff and find out those things. It's unfortunate now that today it's more common you run into those issues than you did, 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago. But, knowing those things is important, but ultimately like be somewhat in the macro breakdown that you need, somewhat eat whole foods, and you're gonna like get the goal that you want. Like you definitely don't have to be perfect. It's just kind of like landing in that range of moderation and being somewhat close.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, like, especially like if you can identify triggers, whether it's for inflammation or gut issues, or bloating, like identifying that, staying away from that is great. But ultimately, like you hear, like, okay, like if soy doesn't bother me, or like, I don't feel bad eating, some, meal with a high soy content, like, or it doesn't upset my stomach. I don't feel more quote unquote inflamed. Like, then I'm kind of splitting hairs to say like, okay, well, but like it's associated with being a good thing to be like, know this or know that, when like, and there's other people, honestly, that are probably going to argue like, no, like that's the best thing. You need the most of that. Like, and people are going to argue about it until their their heads fall off, but figuring out what works, figuring out like what triggers are for people. Like I know as I've, gotten away from my 20s and deeper into my 30s, like I've had to be a little bit more selective with my own diet and figure out like what foods like even help me like my recovery from my workouts. Like my diet feels like it plays a much bigger role in that. So like just being a little bit more selective on that. So it takes some time to figure that stuff out, but like I think it's important to figure it out. But again, understanding that like that doesn't mean that like if you associate something as bad, that like, well, then I can't have it because someone called it bad, and like I don't think it's the most healthy thing. And then again, like it's like, okay, well, then you're not going to lose that 1/100th of a pound that you might could have lost today. Like get over it and like have the Kit Kat that your coworker gave you. Like if it's not going to, send you to the bathroom or something, like it's okay.
Yeah, well, and I think we've talked a lot about like just making sure your general, like your regular habits are somewhat decent. Like if you know you always have to, drive 45 minutes in the middle of the day to like go to the second clinic, or like whatever you have to do. And it's like, oh, like that's, yeah, I stop in and I stop at McDonald's and I get a cheeseburger every day. It's like that's going to be a problem. Like that's a normal meal that probably shouldn't be a cheeseburger, you know? So it's like, all right, let's make our routine habits okay. And then when it's a special occasion, or like you said, someone gives you a Kit Kat and you want to eat it, like by all means eat it. It's like when we were in Italy, like I had a glass of wine, I think every single meal, but it's like we're in Italy, that's what you do. And I was going to enjoy it and I was going to eat all the pastries and all the cannolis and whatnot. But make sure those general habits are generally going to be healthier. Okay, so how do you know, or how does someone know which approach is right for them when it comes to their nutrition?
I think figuring out what approach, I mean, I think everyone's approach, generally speaking, should be the same. It should be in no, I guess, super particular order. It should be, figure out or identify and estimate like what is your actual expenditure, and that doesn't mean like, hey, strap on an Apple Watch and track your calories and live and breathe by that, and whatever the expenditure from whatever wearable you have is biblical and valid, because that's usually not the case either. But if you know like, hey, I want to work out like 5-6 times a week. I weigh like 210 pounds. I'm not the biggest guy, but I'm not the smallest guy either. Like I may be expending, close to this amount. It's like understanding that general expenditure level. And I keep saying this, but like doing a self audit of your own diet, like are there consistencies with what you like to eat right now? Like every breakfast I have oatmeal and chicken sausage with a Gatorade protein bar. Like that's that hasn't changed in years. So, okay, if there are consistencies like that you can kind of track, plug into something like a MyFitnessPal, just to give you an awareness of like, okay, well, like what does that kind of macro count really look like? Am I getting enough protein ultimately? Would be my personal goal with that, with like making sure I'm not just, it's not just carbs and fat, but if I have anything like weight loss or performance related, making sure that I have a good protein intake. So again, doing that, like getting an understanding of like, okay, what do I usually do? How much am I probably expending? What am I probably eating? And then like outside of that, it's just, okay, well, what are the easiest or lowest hanging fruits that we can kind of make adjustments based off that? Is it like, okay, we need more protein, so I'm going to add, another chicken breast in this meal? Or is it like, probably having too much carbs, and too much carbs is going to be variable person to person, but okay, then maybe I don't need that third bowl of cereal for my mid-morning snack or something, like uh and understanding, like again, taking it slow, like we kind of said before, like not just going like, okay, no, I'm going to flip it, I'm going to have this completely new meal plan, I'm going to change this and that. Like it realistically, and for long-term sustainability, probably just needs to rely on like, okay, like I understand what activity level I have. I understand what my intake really is. Like, do those match up? And if not, like, what are the couple easy things that I can either add in or take away to start with to kind of like work my way towards whatever that goal I may have.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And I think it's important, like you said, kind of just make sure like is your intake somewhat where it needs to be? Are you somewhat balanced in what you're eating? Like, a common thing we see is someone will be eating 60% fat and like 15% protein. It's like, well, let's just fix that. You know, it doesn't have to be like you're doing some magic recipe there. So I guess, obviously there's exercise and there's nutrition and those are obviously major components of weight loss and being healthier and being fit and whatever the goal is. But to me, honestly, I think like you said, everyone kind of knows generally probably what they need to do exercise wise. They know generally a healthy or somewhat healthy nutrition plan is. A lot of times, kind of the game changer is that accountability aspect. And I think it's honestly the most underrated because everyone thinks like, well, I know what to do. And then, they don't do it. And then, they're like, well, it's like, well, okay, like if you know what to do, then why haven't you done it? You know, is putting those habits, like having that accountability in place. And so, like, whether it's a coach, a friend, like a coworker, someone like just kind of helping you build that support to me is super important. I think I'm biased, like being a health coach, but also like, I don't care if it's me, like go work with someone that can help you figure it out if you can't. Um, and obviously we've seen the benefit from other people having that. Why do you feel like having that kind of external accountability really does help people kind of make that next step?
Yeah, I don't know if there's like a super like objective answer to that. I just think subjectively, like having that external partnership or pairing or kind of like little angel on your shoulder whispering, to you what to do, like just adds that element of like, okay, no, this is like a serious part of what I do on a day-to-day basis. I felt like for that, part of what you were just saying, you're like talking right at me because like, I my job, like I live and breathe training, and making people stronger, faster, fitter, and I myself, we're a few weeks into our college semester right now, and I've had 3 workouts in the last like 2.5 weeks, which is really bad for me. And there's two reasons for that. It's because I don't have any other external accountability, or my own coach right now. And I finished the program that I was previously on, so it's like I'm kind of just like you know going off the cuff for those like few workouts that I have gotten in, and like that added element of like getting a coach, like pushing you, helping you, encouraging you, I think is really helpful. But also them just like giving you that structure that we all probably need is like a really underrated aspect too. Like I know I thrive best when and why I'm not thriving right now is like it's like I don't have a plan and I have the excuse like, oh shoot, well now it's this time of day, like I guess I'll just do this and this tomorrow and kind of combine 2 or 3 days, oddly. And whereas like when you're operating on some sort of a plan, like it's like, okay, well no, it's Tuesday, which means I do this and this, and it sucks. Don't really want to do it right now. I'm pretty tired, but like that's part of your day, and that's part of the structure that you have. And again, that goes back to the discipline that you want people to have. So that accountability is huge. I think some people are really good at being self accountable, but I think no matter what, whether that's them having a coach or uh, them just having a gym partner or friend that they go with, is ultimately still just having some sort of structure with it, both with training and nutrition, because that structure is what's going to help us. It's a lot easier to go off track, for lack of better words, when we don't have that kind of plan laid out in front of us. At least that's kind of what I've found with not only myself, but a lot of our athletes and a lot of our clients. So yeah, accountability is really important. But I think like a big part of what that accountability and why it's important is just because it allows you to have that structure, an avenue to have good structure too. We've kind of talked a lot about like, you know, the exercise and nutrition, that accountability now too, like what would you maybe say to someone that like, okay, well, I've tried to do all this. Like I've tried to lose weight. I've tried to change my diet. I've tried to change my exercise plan. I have a coach, helping me with this. Like I'm starting to lose that discipline, or like, I'm starting to have doubts with everything. Like, what are either like words of encouragement you would give that person, or like words of, maybe like constructive criticism, I guess.
Well, I think if someone's tried, they've tried. First of all, this is a great question. I really like this question, by the way. I think if someone's tried, like they've tried changing their exercise routine, they've tried changing what they do nutritionally, they have a coach, they have a support system, like you're still not making progress. There's a ton of different like little areas that go into here. If this was like my client that we were talking to at the time, one of the biggest things that you can see, and there's a ton of research around, especially in like the nutrition piece, is underreporting. And so it's like basically like when you're estimating how much you're eating during the day, or you're just not reporting everything, like that little 100 to 500 calorie difference over the course of a week can be the difference in you losing a pound and staying where you're at, or even putting on weight. Talking through those things are really important. But also like recognizing if something's not working, or maybe you're not making the progress that you're trying to, like something probably needs to change, because you're going to start to develop limiting beliefs around like, yeah, this just won't happen for me, or yeah, I can't lose weight, or I can't like do these things, when in reality is like you haven't done it to this point, but it doesn't mean you can't do it moving forward. And I think this is probably the problems I have with this industry specifically, is like these kind of a bunch of people just like, yeah, this worked for me. Like I lost 100 pounds. And so I'm an expert in helping everyone lose 100 pounds. And it's like, what works for you. And that's like in your wheelhouse, but it may not be in the wheelhouse of like the people that you're actually trying to assist. And I think it's really important to work with someone or have a coach that doesn't have a wheelhouse, where it's like, yeah, I can help this one person, this one circumstance, but be able to actually like apply, problem solving skills and have the background and experience to be able to like figure out what's specifically going on with that person. Because we've seen that before, right? Where it's like someone's hesitant to work with us because like, well, I just finished working with a coach and it didn't work for me. What makes you any different? And it's always like, well, yeah, they were, weekend personal trainer that they lost 50 pounds. They think you can lose 50 pounds and they just give you the workouts that they did, but that's not what's right for you. Yeah. So I think some tough love there is probably needed. But as far as, constructive feedback in that circumstance is like, it's your process. And so like own that process. And, if you work with 3 or 4 different coaches and nothing's worked for you, like the only common denominator is you. And so it's like one of those approaches should have at least worked a little bit if you're talking to the right people. Obviously, like there's that context that's always going to be there, but like be willing to like actually look internally. I'm the one that has to actually like own it and do it the right way. Because it's very easy to log in. Like if you have, like all of our clients are in an app, and most clients for most programs are going to be in an app. And, it's very easy to log in and be like, yeah, I checked the box, like I did it, or I don't really want to do the 3rd or 4th set, or today I don't want to log my nutrition, or I'm going to log it and leave out, a couple of things just so I fit the need on paper. Like fitting a need on paper is never going to actually help you make progress. And like I just had a call with a client yesterday who she just came back from Hawaii. She lost 3 pounds while she was in Hawaii, but she felt horrible at first because she was like, I didn't track anything. I just walked on the beach and all this stuff. It's like, it's not about like what's actually on paper. It's at what you're actually doing and what's going to actually help you make progress. And that's not like checking boxes. And that's, I think the difference you'll see between a coach that knows what they're doing and a coach that like kind of just gives you a plan is like, they're just checking in to make sure you're checking off the boxes. You're checking off the boxes. They're like, yeah, it should work. Versus someone that's like digging into that actual like circumstance and making sure that you're making progress and that's sustainable for you. So that's a long-winded answer to your question, but I think there's just so many prongs you can go off of in that circumstance.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, ultimately, it's such a multifactorial like issue, I guess. At the end of the day, like it's not to say like I think like we all need to be weary of the people in this field that say like, well, you just need to do this, or like if you just take away like this and this, then like you're good. And like these like this kind of like absolutist mentality where like all it takes is this, or all it takes is my special recipe. And it's good for marketing and stuff, but it's not always like the most practical output for everyone, because again, like losing weight, getting healthier, like getting fitter, like it's such a multifactorial process. And I think ultimately like we just need to understand like kind of those general guidelines for each of those areas of training, nutrition, lifestyle, accountability, and be consistent with whatever plan that we can have in play. And then ultimately, if something's not working at the magnitude that we'd like it to, go back through, look at what, one or two elements might could change or need to be changed, and adjust that. And again, back to the buzzword, just be patient with it, because it sucks, but it's also really rewarding once you kind of figure that stuff out, and you're with either a group of people that kind of help you and educate you along the way, and you figure out a style of training you enjoy, and a meal plan that you like, and you feel better and you feel healthier and you lose weight, and then you're just like, damn, I did it. And it may ultimately take some people longer to get to that point than others, but like again, I think everyone has that ability to get to that.
Yeah, and also like you said, we obviously want to know we're making progress, but it has to be over a decent time horizon, right? It's like you can't tell if a program's working for you over 2 weeks. So like you make an adjustment, wait a month, see if you made progress. If you made progress, keep doing that. If you did make progress, then you adjust something else, but not just saying, oh, I didn't lose weight over 3 days. Like there's so many variations and fluctuations that can happen throughout a week that there's no way you'll know if something's working over the course of a week.